This is the Mid-America PTTC podcast, where we believe prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. I'm your host, Dave Clausen, and I'm the director of the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center. This is episode 40, and in today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Kim Nelson, our Region 7 SAMHSA Regional Administrator. Now, Kim shares something that's worth celebrating all year long. What is it, you ask? Well, you got to keep listening to find out. She also highlights some of the regional data trends and gives us an insight into groundbreaking prevention work going on in our very own region. Kim is a true prevention leader and all-around champion for the behavioral health field. So settle in for a great episode and get to know our very own Kim Nelson. Now, before we get into the content, though, we'd like to thank our funder, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And a quick note, although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
Every single one of us is a leader and could be a leader.
It started with a local coalition in our county.
Strategies you know, but stories you don't.
Data is the currency of prevention.
We want to reduce the negative and we want to promote the positive.
Collaboration is the only way to move the prevention needle.
About connecting the research with the practitioner.
Put something out there that was kind of off the wall and create a community of prevention.
It's a passion, it's a real love to try to help make our world a little bit better, a little bit happier, small pieces at a time.
It's said an overnight success takes 16 years.
If we didn't plan for the change, but if we didn't help orchestrate it, then change is going to be upon us.
When it comes to the spiff, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Because the real power is in the process.
Ultimately, all of us want success in the work we're doing. We don't want to do mindless work. Proactive, participatory planning promotes positive, preventive progress.
All right, welcome to this episode. And hey, I got to tell you what, folks, I am excited to welcome our guest, our regional administrator, Kim Nelson. Kim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, yes. Hey, let's jump right in. And I know you're from our Mid-America region, but some of our listeners probably don't know much about sort of your background in the behavioral health field. Would you mind kind of unpacking that for us a little bit?
Sure, happy to. Probably the most important thing about me first, I'm a person in long-term recovery from addiction. And happily, this year, November 6th, I'll be celebrating 30 years in recovery. Seems amazing.
We got to take time out and applause for that.
Thanks for the applause. So I've decided I'm celebrating all year long. So, and I don't tell you this because I think it makes me special or different. I really want to normalize and destigmatize substance use disorders. These are common conditions. And most importantly, people recover. My career has grown out of that recovery. So I'm a licensed addictions counselor in the state of Kansas, a certified peer specialist. I've worked in the field of recovery since 1992, all within the state of Kansas, predominantly until recently. Started out doing community-based work with women with substance use disorders and their children. So we had a women's and children's program, residential, outpatient. Did that work for a long time, followed by work inside of the prisons in Kansas. So a couple different prisons, working with folks with substance use disorders behind the walls. Then I moved really into addiction policy work, mostly at the state level, did that for some years. And now I do that at the federal government level. And so that's who you're talking to, Dave.
Oh, such a rich history working with folks in our region and really making a big impact in so many different lives. Thank you for doing that work and also helping end stigma around substance use disorder and addiction. I love it.
It's my pleasure.
All right. So can we talk a little bit about SAMHSA and regional office. Quite frankly, my time at the Illinois Higher Ed Center, and I'd never even heard of SAMHSA's regional offices. I always thought it was just out east in DC.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's true for a lot of people. I think folks don't know often. I run into lots of folks that don't know that SAMHSA, and of course, when we say SAMHSA, we mean the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. That folks don't know we have regional offices. So, newsflash, we do. There are 10 of them around the country. So each of the Health and Human Services regions in the country, each of the 10 of those has a regional office. Ours in this region is located in Kansas City. I'm the regional administrator in that office. And then we also have assistant regional administrators. So the offices are staffed with primarily two folks. We do have a part-time administrative person who we're hiring actually to support that office. But as the regional administrator serving here, I cover, we're called Region 7 here. So I cover Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, and Missouri. And really, the job of the regional office is to provide leadership in all things behavioral health related in our region. So I do that by ensuring that folks in our region know what SAMHSA's priorities are, bringing stuff that's happening in DC into Region 7, into our 4 states, and then also being sure that DC understands what's happening in Region 7. What is happening in Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, and Missouri that we need to highlight and elevate to DC. So that's a large part of the job. Lots of collaboration with community partners and stakeholders, and increasingly stakeholders who are non-behavioral health stakeholders, trying to help folks, understand and collaborate together and connect people to resources, all in an effort to really reduce the impact of substance use and mental illness in our communities. So one of the ways that we do this, for instance, in a practical example, is that we facilitate community conversations and convenings around various topics in our region. We've done that in the past, just with a prevention focus a couple years ago. We do that, to optimize the work that we're all doing kind of in the region. Again, to promote prevention, early intervention, treatment, recovery in our communities, promoting well-being, basically, ensuring that behavioral health is a part of every conversation about health, because, and other things, but certainly without behavioral health, we don't have health. So that's kind of what we do, Dave.
I know y'all can't see it, but I am smiling. Just runs so true with what we believe at the Mid-America PTTC, that prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. And you are such a valuable, important leader in that aspect, bringing folks together. Love it. Love it.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.
Now, you're in a great position to really share some insights on sort of our regional trends. Any kind of insights or any information you could share with us there about what's going on around our region?
Absolutely. I have a lot to share about this. So beware, my answer is going to be kind of long on
Mhm.
this one. I'll try to not be too verbose, but there's a lot happening.
Mhm.
So first, let me talk a little bit just about data trends. Kind of starting at the national level, SAMHSA conducts the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, big, large survey that produces data year after year after year at a national level. Last year's data, published in September of 2020, and this is pre-pandemic data, so it's the 2019 data that was published in 2020, indicates that about 8% of adults have a substance use disorder. That number hasn't changed much. It's pretty consistent. But an increasing number of just over 20% of adults have a mental illness. And then about 4% of people struggle with both. I think important to note about last year's data is that we saw nearly a 6% increase of folks struggling with substance and mental health challenges, and that increase was comprised entirely of increases in mental illness. And that's pre-pandemic. So during the pandemic, we know we don't have the official data from that time period yet, but studies are starting to emerge. I'm sure you've seen them that folks, upwards of 40+% of people are saying they are struggling with mental illness and substance use disorders and concerns during this pandemic. And we can't really talk about, these topics without also mentioning kind of, two co-occurring epidemics that are happening in our country: overdose deaths and suicide deaths. So in the last 15 years, rates of suicide have increased in almost every state. And those percentages of increases range from, just under 6% in Delaware to over 57% increase in rate of suicides in North Dakota. 25, so half of our states in the country had an increase in suicide rates of more than 30%. So, and in our region, this is particularly important because Kansas had the fifth highest increase um, in the nation in suicide rates at 45% increase. So, those are kind of from, some national kind of snapshot pieces. A little bit more about the specifics of the data in our region. I'm going to talk a little bit about the substance use disorder trends that we're seeing. So and I'm going to talk about these, for each of the states in the region. I'll try and hit the high points quickly, just a few points. We could be here all day talking about this, but just a few points. So for Kansas, let's kind of stick with Kansas here. In an absolutely unprecedented situation, Kansas is seeing more admissions into substance use disorder treatment for amphetamines than even alcohol. That never happens. Alcohol always leads the pack when it comes to treatment admissions. It's always alcohol is the primary substance that people admit, based on, and then all other substances follow that. Well, this year, Kansas has seen that trend reverse, and amphetamines are leading the pack in terms of admissions. We know that similar phenomenon is actually happening in Oklahoma as well. So it's not just our region. But this is pretty big news to see treatment admissions, for amphetamines outpacing even alcohol. The other thing that's happening kind of related to this stimulants or amphetamine or methamphetamine kind of discussion in Kansas, for instance, 2018 to 2019, they saw the number of deaths that psychostimulants were involved with double. They saw the highest number of deaths that they've ever seen in the state involving psychostimulants, this last year's data. And, in our region, we have to kind of consider urban and rural locations because we have some of both, of course. And in Kansas, against it, one last little data piece in Kansas, the numbers varied pretty widely when they looked at rural versus urban numbers of death. So from 833 deaths in an urban area to 36 in a rural area. However, when they turned those numbers into actual rates, the rates did not vary widely. They were much closer together. So what we know is that, the psychostimulant related overdose deaths are happening in both urban and rural locations everywhere in the state. So switching and talking about Iowa quickly. So Iowa unfortunately hit a tragic milestone this year. This year, they passed their all-time high number of deaths related to opioids. So in 2017, they hit their all-time high number of deaths related to opioids. That number had started to trend down. This year, so the 2020 and 20, basically, during the pandemic, essentially, the number just started going back up again. Important to understand too about this data is that it's provisional. It's not even the final data in the state. So they know that number is going to increase some more. Related to psychostimulants, again, overdose deaths in Iowa from 2016 to 2020 more than doubled. And again, that data is not done coming in, so that number is likely to increase. In Nebraska, they are seeing kind of the same trend about overdose deaths. So they had seen a high in 2017, and then 2018, there was a decrease in overdose deaths. But since that time, it has been steadily increasing, such that their most recent data indicates a higher number of overdose deaths than even the high they had hit in 2017. Their treatment admissions are interesting to look at. They've got alcohol and methamphetamine pretty close together in terms of the number of people that are admitting with that as a primary substance, followed pretty closely by alcohol plus another drug, the percentage of people admitting, and then right after that is marijuana. And then finally in Missouri, Missouri has started crossing out the word opioids when they refer to the overdose epidemic, and started to use the word poisoning overdose epidemic, because it does a couple things. It captures a more accurate picture that includes the psychostimulant deaths that they are seeing as well. And it also underscores that when we say opioid epidemic, people tend to think prescription opioid deaths. They tend to think of the opioid crisis as, little orange pill bottles. Well, that's not really the case anymore. That's not really accurate. What's leading to deaths in Missouri is, and elsewhere, I would say as well, but they know for sure in Missouri, what's leading to deaths is a highly potent, unpredictable drug supply that is dominated by contamination with fentanyl. Importantly, also to note in Missouri is that racial disparities are increasing. So Black men are now significantly more likely to die than any other group, 4 times the rate of the general population. In fact, Missouri's ranked 3rd in US overdose rates for Black people. So just a quick note about marijuana in the region in general. A couple years ago, we saw Kansas and Missouri with statistically significant increases in marijuana use for people 12 and above. Last year's data showed all 4 of our states. So Kansas and Missouri continuing, but also adding Iowa and Nebraska for statistically significant increases in marijuana use for people 12 and 12 and older. So, of course, especially concerning there is the impact of marijuana on young developing brains of our youth. So I know that's a lot of data, that's a lot of information, but as you all as prevention folks know, we need to know what the data says so that we know how to target interventions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a lot of data, and kind of makes me feel two different ways hearing all of those numbers. It weighs heavy on my heart when you put that in the perspective of those are lives, those are people, those are human
Yeah.
beings, not just numbers. So it's
hmm
heavy in that sense, but it also invigorates me, fires me up. Like let's do something. Let's get
hmm
moving. I
Yep.
know you've been doing some work, of course, around that, and especially around sort of stimulants. So we heard that in the data for all 4 states. What
Yeah.
what are some of the things you've been working on?
So there is a lot happening in our region based on this data. But I'm going to focus these comments kind of on in the prevention realm,
Mhm.
because I'm talking to Dave with the PTTC.
All right.
So I'm going to focus in there. But just know that the states in our region have received significant increases in dollars from SAMHSA this year, last year, the year before last, and with more increases coming. In fact, I just saw that the $1.9 trillion package has passed and is heading to Biden's desk, President Biden's
Yeah.
desk. So just as a side note, within that package, we think there's about $3 billion additional dollars for SAMHSA. More to come on that.
Mhm.
But that kind of a trend is what leads, to my comments to say, there's a lot of dollars available right now. And so I'm sure you all know each state receives, a substance abuse prevention and treatment block grant from us every year. And that 20% of that at minimum needs to be spent on prevention. And the big news there is that that block grant in this last round of stimulus funding received a $1.858 billion increase. So those you will see an announcement about that likely this week. And so, I say that just so that there are more dollars coming into that fund that many of you do work in that, what we call the 20% set aside for prevention. There are some additional dollars coming there. Other sources of new prevention and additional prevention funds are in discretionary grant programs like Project Aware. I'm sure you are familiar with advancing wellness and resiliency in education. That's really about trying to improve mental health literacy, suicide prevention programs. Another discretionary grant that I want to talk specifically about is the Strategic Prevention Framework Partners for Success. We have long names and then we shorten them and you just call it PFS. We love our acronyms in federal government. Sorry. So I'm sure you all know the PFS, you know what that means. I want to just highlight some of the work. It's literally groundbreaking work that's happening in our region. So you heard those data trends around stimulant use and deaths. Missouri also is looking at their data and seeing that this is an area of concern for them. They saw that the primary drug of choice and treatment admissions had roughly doubled from 2011 to 2019. So they submitted an application and were awarded a PFS grant with one of their goals being to prevent and reduce the use of methamphetamine in adults residing in selected areas. So, as you might know, there is no evidence-based practice for preventing methamphetamine use in adults. However, Missouri followed their data and said, as a leader, I would say in the country, they said, we see this problem. We know there's not an evidence-based practice for it, but we also know we need to address it. So we want to experiment. We want to try out some ideas to try to start, doing what we can to address this issue in our communities. So, and then as soon as folks started hearing about that in our region, they were interested in collaborating and learning more. And so Missouri has been, like people are in the Midwest, at least in my experience, they are open and willing to share what they are doing. They're at the very beginning of this journey. It's a new initiative. It's exciting. They're trying things out. And they are, this Friday, I have a meeting with Kansas where the Missouri PFS project director is going to come and talk about what they're doing so that Kansas can start thinking about what they can do in this space as well as it relates to prevention. One last thing about that I would just say is just that we are looking at, because this is such kind of an increasing issue. We've always had issues with methamphetamine in our region, as you all I'm sure know, but this seems to be really increasing, especially the overdose deaths. Again, related to psychostimulants that are likely contaminated with fentanyl, many of them, but still, it's drawing our attention to the need to really do what we can. So we're looking at kind of what it might look like to host kind of a regional convening around methamphetamine and prevention. So more to come about that. Stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned for that. And yes, the Missouri folks and Kansas folks are regulars in our communities of practice. And what Missouri's doing around meth has definitely been a topic. And for those listeners that don't know, jump on in one of our communities of practice. And to find those, go to pttcnetwork.org and also put that link in the show notes. Just a little shout out there, of course. Now, I know you in Missouri, y'all have been working pretty close around stimulants. Didn't y'all just have a big presentation not too long ago? Was it Prevention Day?
We did. It was so exciting. So our region is getting recognized kind of nationally around work with methamphetamine, and then specifically methamphetamine and prevention. So I was asked by our National Center for Substance Abuse Prevention leadership to join in with a person at headquarters and give a presentation about, quote, methamphetamine as it relates to prevention. And I did not even think twice about doing that by myself. And I reached out to Missouri, to Susan Depew, who's the project leader on that grant I was just talking about. And she agreed, because she's fabulous, to come on with me. And we did a presentation on methamphetamine and implications for prevention at the National Prevention Day conference that hopefully many people were just in attendance. I think our session, I want to say, had almost 200 people in attendance. We did a breakout session. So it was, and I'm sure there's a recording of it somewhere if somebody's interested in that.
I'll see if I can track that recording down and put that link in the show notes as well, if I can find it. There's a lot of great work going on in prevention in our region. There really is. And I just love it. Just the sense of bringing everybody together, because we really can learn from each other and support each other. Makes my heart happy. Oh, it does. But before I go down that little rant or soapbox, because I get fired up and passionate about that, about what we believe, bringing folks together, let's go ahead and wrap this episode up. But before we go, do you have one final closing thought, one main takeaway? If you're going to remember one thing from this episode, remember this. What would it be?
Well, I guess for me, my closing thought is I love working in Region 7. It's where I'm from. It's where I've done all my work. It's where I live my life. When we're moving about more freely, one of my favorite things to do is visit communities and see how I can help local coalitions, local agencies that are doing amazing work all around our region. And speaking of coalition meetings, whether they're virtual or in person, we might have to wait for a little while, but virtual events, meetings that you're doing in the region, I am happy to come and participate and be helpful if I can, just so that we can continue to grow and spread the good word about all the great things happening in our region to address substance use and mental illness from the continuum of prevention, early intervention, treatment, and recovery. But mostly, I would just like to say thank you. I believe that solutions to our crisis of increasing issues with substance use and mental illness are local, and that we save lives when we do that work at a local level. And so you save lives. And so I'm grateful for you, and I'm always available for support.
Absolutely. Prevention is about people and best done with people, because prevention is better together. All right. Talk about a great episode. Great episode. Thanks for all of that great information, giving us some good insights, and continuing to be a leader in the behavioral health field in the region and nationally. And we're glad to have you in Region 7. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you all, and thanks for your work.
That concludes this episode. Thank you all for not only taking time to listen, but your continued work to make our region safe, healthy, and drug-free. If you'd like to know what training we have coming up, check out our website at pttcnetwork.org. And remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.